Welcome. We are here to talk today about Bourdieu's social theory. Have you ever heard about Bourdieu? Raise your hand if, okay, we have one person. Wow, that's a lot. Hi, I am Romeu. You can find me on the internet, like on Twitter, right? And if you go into this rootkit thing, you can go into the, I suppose, yes, you can use the link to go to the same mural I'm using right now to write as we go. We can all write together if you want. If you don't, but if you want to write while we go, write while we go, anything goes. Some little disclaimers real quick. You can find me on the internet as Malk Zamev. I work at a small company that you may have heard of called the Boston Consulting Group. And today, this presentation will contain typos. We are here to talk about social theory, to understand society itself. My main goal with this presentation is that you get out of here understanding the basics of why hierarchy happens even in a supposedly flat organization, basically. That's the most important takeaway, right? And Bourdieu gives you a lot of tools in order to understand that. And I'm trying to give you those tools, try to give you a common vocabulary to discuss about those issues with your friends and colleagues and family. And hey, you can just change seats, my friend, don't worry. And talking with people about this, okay? So the main goal here is to understand why does hierarchy happens in a flat org, right? Can you hear me? Read me. Is this readable? Too small? Right. If you cannot read me, raise your hand. Or you go into the mural itself and you increase the size of the thing. Whatever. Okay? So, Bourdieu, he talked about a lot of traits. His social theory was an infinite number of traits. And we don't have time to talk about an infinite number of anything today. So in those 15 minutes, I will concentrate on 3. Okay? Just those 3. But you kind of have to imagine that it has a lot of more than those 3. Yeah? We'll talk about symbolic violence. We're talking about social and cultural capital. All those words will make sense by the end of this presentation, hopefully, if they probably don't now. Yes? And we'll talk about hexis. As you may have guessed, Dude liked to invent new terms for stuff, right? And I want to explain those 3, explain how they intervene with each other, 10, explain how they intervene with tech. So we'll talk a little bit about agile methods. Have you heard about those? So that's the menu for today, okay? Let's go? Let's go. So, symbolic violence. Every culture has, every era also, every culture at any given time has like an icon of power, a drawing in your collective heads about how does somebody that should have power looks like, right? And that drawing changes over time, yeah? Evolves. Like, for example, at some centuries ago, being fat was closer to the icon of power because you kind of have to have a lot of money in order to actually be fat, right? in 2020, 2021, that's no longer true. You can be very poor and very fat. So being fat is no longer a sign of power. Yes? So symbolic violence, we'll get to that, right, is a violence that happens around when somebody is very close to the icon of power. So let's talk about the icon of power. So, oh yeah, this presentation will contain sociology. If you don't like that, please run away. I will try to make this palatable. It's the whole gist of this presentation, but it's still sociology at the end of the day, right? Disclaimer, a real quick disclaimer. I am not a sociologist. I am just a geek. That's the first one. Another very important disclaimer is all models are wrong. Some are useful. I like this one. All right? It's not perfect. It's a model. Let's go for it. So, the icon of power is drawn by a lot of different little, infinite number of little traits that compose this picture of how does somebody that should have power looks like in your collective heads, right? It's like a way of dressing, right? Like a way of dressing, or like a way of accessorizing, or maybe a certain color of skin, a certain gender that you may have heard about, and an infinite number of other traits like that. Like, for example, one of trait that I like a lot in the icon of power, right, is this color, gender, dressing, dress for success. But there's one I like a lot, is the luxury of calmness. So, when you are not impacted by a system of oppression, it's way easier to be calm about stuff. Hence, in the icon of power, we adhere calmness as being more right. Somebody that is calmer is probably righter, right? And that's also part of our collective drawing in your head of the icon of power. A powerful person is calm. Somebody that is really hungry is probably less powerful. Probably not be able to reign over their own feelings or something like that, right? Which is very convenient. This system is really, really well done. It works really, really quite well to maintain itself, right? So, let's go for it. So, when you are closer to the icon of power, say, I don't know, like me, you are perceived as deserving that power a little bit more by everybody else. And so you look at somebody, you instantly know that the person is closer to the icon of power, and you see that everybody else also perceives that person as being a little bit closer. And we have this consensus of agreement of, oh, that person deserves power. Right? When you have that, then it's easier to give because everybody else is giving it. This is like the whole social movement of giving to those people. Make sense? Yeah. So there's kind of a peer pressure to go into it. Now, and this is the moment of another disclaimer, very important one. Sociology is not psychology. We're talking about statistics. We're not talking about individual, it's not the thing that goes inside your own head. You may say, oh, I'm different. Yes. It doesn't change anything. enough people are like that. You just need enough number of people for this to work out. Yeah? Okay? All right. So, I've talked about the icon of power, but not talking about symbolic violence. What is symbolic violence? Well, that's very, very, I don't love it. I love the concept of understanding it. Symbolic violence is a violence you do to yourself. That's very important. It's a very important part. That's the tricky part to understand it, but it's a very important part. It's a violence you do to yourself. So, we programmed everybody to yield power. Power is given. You cannot force power on people. People give you power, right? So, you are programmed to give a little bit of power over you to people that are closer to the icon of power than you. So you exert the violence on yourself. That's key for this whole castle of cards to keep up. Otherwise, everything will fall down. Symbolic violence is a violence you do to yourself. We all do. As a society, we all do. So, you look at somebody that has a higher icon of power level than you know it immediately, you just know it, deep inside. And you give a little bit power over you to that person. We all do. You are doing that violence. That's very important because the person receiving the power over you, they may ignore the violence. They can be completely oblivious to it, never actually seeing it, never feeling it, perceiving it, unless they are in the kind of the middle ground, right? They inflict on themselves towards somebody else, and they receive somebody else. They may a little bit see it, a little bit. But basically, you receive power, and you think it's freely given. You're not inflicting the violence, right? So, the person benefiting from the oppression has the luxury of being oblivious. Right? That's good. I mean, not, but you get my point. And the person that is oppressed, well, now that gets interesting, right? Salient, right? They are condemned to be oppressed, of course, to be the enforcer of their oppression, right? So it's tiresome to exert the oppression. The person that benefits don't need to exert it. They also condemned to be invisible. The oppression is not seen, but the people benefiting from the oppression because they are themselves doing it, right? To be invisible, to be doubted. Right. It's a system that works quite well. That's a very powerful homeostasis. Make sense? All right. So that's symbolic violence, right? Yay. Let's talk about social and cultural capital. Oh no, let's not. Sorry, let's give you an example here. So symbolic violence. Let me give you some pictures of that, right? There is some level of that you can buy, right? If you learn to walk in a certain way, talk in a certain way, dress in a certain way, you can increase your closeness to the icon of power and hence buy yourself some symbolic violence, right? Right? Up until the moment you cannot. So what happens is, have you ever seen somebody that is wearing a suit and has never wore a suit in their lives? You know. You just know. Right? They don't look comfortable in it. Right? A poor person's idea of a rich person, a poor person's idea of class is different from a rich person's ideas of class. Right? You can buy symbolic violence up at your certain point, and then you can't. Then you're just rich. Doesn't mean that you have symbolic violence. Make sense? And what Bourdieu put the difference is, you could lose a lot of money, be kind of poor, have a high enough level of symbolic violence that will help you out get that money back again, and vice versa. You could have no symbolic violence at all, become rich, and just be nouveau rich, and a little bit gauche, and like a rapper that just got their first check. Make sense? You don't have enough symbolic violence yet.
And examples from tech, maybe?
Oh, and examples from tech, maybe. Yes. No, I don't have any examples from tech. It doesn't happen at all. I would not know where to start. How could I say that? I'm looking for it, but I will. Yeah, this will come, and yeah. How? Yes. So. Social and cultural capital. So, what Bourdieu would try to bring into this is that culture is something that you can accumulate as a capital in the same way that you accumulate financial capital. And in the same way, culture accumulates like financial capital. And in the same way, you have the haves and have-nots. Have you ever been in a city with a lot of museums? Have you ever lived in a city with a lot of museums? Yes, no, maybe. Okay, have you ever been in a museum in a city like that? Right. Have you ever entered a museum and realized, I don't understand anything here? Yes? Well, that's because it had an entry price that was not only the ticket, right? There was the financial entry price of the ticket itself, but it has an entry price of cultural capital. It's like this invisible, you must be this tall to enter, right? But it's this much cultural capital to understand what we're talking about. And the more you have, the better you understand it. You understand in different ways. It will enrich and change your perceptions of things. But you need at least this much to make sense of it at all. Yeah? Right. For example, who here likes contemporary art? Right. And who here, maybe some of you have ever been into a contemporary art museum or in front of it and you say, oh, this is bullshit. Who here has ever said that? Okay, so maybe some of you are still doing that, right? So let's do this together. Parenthesis here, just a parenthesis here about contemporary art, right? Let's increase your cultural capital right now, right? Let's do this. So I live in Paris, right? Beautiful city. Come, do visit Paris. It's a very, very interesting city. And you have this museum that I love that is called the Pompidou. Have you heard about the Pompidou? Right, it is like a museum of contemporary art in Paris, right? And a lot of people hate the Pompidou. When I was 15 years old, I hated the Pompidou. And near the entrance of the Pompidou, you have this magnificent piece of art that I love dearly, and a lot of people hate, which is Pompidou. He has no name. The name is no name, so I have to Google it in some way, right? Luckily, oh yeah, right. So that. So that painting there is, as you can see, white. Yeah? And maybe some of you are looking at this and say, this is bullshit. Maybe not. So let's talk about that. So see, have you ever wondered how many people per day, because like a lot of people visit the Pompidou every day. Have you wondered how many people per day go in front of that, look at that and say, this is bullshit? Thousands, right? Right. Now, take a deep breath, friends. Prepare yourself. Every one of those people are part of the art piece. The art piece is not the white painting. The art piece is the whole group of the art painting and the person in front of it looking at it and say, this is bullshit. That's the art piece, right? And once you understand that, you looking at them, right? Say, oh yeah, the painting and the person both are part of the art piece. Realizing that you are now part of the art piece. Right? Welcome, welcome. So what happens is, the whole point of the contemporary art is to destroy the subject-object duality in art itself. Right? The difference between the object I'm seeing and myself in the art experience. Right? And destroying that difference, and so you are part of it. If you are part of it, then what gives? What happens? Yeah? Make sense? Now you may say, okay, Romeu, this changes completely how I see that piece, but it is still bullshit. And fair, but it's now a different bullshit, right? And now, friends, you just got what happens when you increase cultural capital. Every bullshit changes forever. It will no longer be the same, yeah? And not only will no longer be the same, you will instantly recognize people that has that piece of cultural capital now. You go in the museum, you know the people that know this and the people that don't know this. You just know now, immediately. Just by looking at them, they don't need to talk. Just by looking at the physical language near the art piece, you know. Right? Right. Cultural capital changes how you see the world. Cultural capital changes how you see people seeing. Cultural capital changes what group you belong into. Cultural capital changes everything around you. It's intangible, and yet is central to the whole way of society is created. Make sense? Good, good, good. And hence, this is all fine and good and awesome, right? Awesome. And problem starts that is when we are all ingrained deep inside us to see somebody that has a higher cultural capital as being more right. And that thing there, that programming there, gets in the way of a lot of stuff. For example, if you are expert in a subject, discussing with somebody else that has a way bigger cultural capital than you, maybe they can talk a lot about art or Bourdieu, for example. But you are the expert in the current subject you are discussing. You still see that person that being a little bit righter than you on things. This will bias the whole conversation, right? And even if you don't, you say, oh, no, I'm the sexual Romeu, I'm the okay, you are the exception. Everybody else will still see the conversation between you and kind of think of that person as a little bit more right, because they have a higher cultural capital. You perceive a smallness in yourself and in others when you perceive them as having a lower cultural capital. This creates an hierarchy. Hi, talk.
So do you think that people that think they have a higher cultural capital will think they are more right?
That also happens. Yes, exactly. People that have a higher cultural capital also think of themselves as being a little bit righter in a lot of stuff, right? It gets in the way of everybody. Yeah? And not only that, it is easier to discuss with people that had a cultural capital closer to you. It is. Because you're explaining less stuff. You have a lot of common ground, right? Whereas somebody that has a lower cultural capital, you have a lot more explaining to do to get in the same thing, the same speed in changing stuff, right? So it's kind of pleasant to discuss with people that are closer to your cultural capital, right? It's a kind of a marathon of life where you feel good with the people that are around your group. Makes sense? Right. So that's a very well done system, right? To maintain like a social order of people that have and have not, and power, basically. Yeah? Good. Now that we have centered that, social capital, you take everything I said about cultural capital and culture, and replace cultural capital by social capital and culture by relations, and done. Every relation you have makes having other relations easier. When you have relations that open doors, that could open even money and things like that, you could lose your own money, but you have enough social capital, you could get it all back, right? With enough social and cultural capital to get out of the back. Now, those two interact with each other. It's easier to get social capital when you have cultural capital, and vice versa. When you have social capital, getting cultural capital is also easier, right? The difference of those capitals is that you never spend them. Social capital can spend, but cultural capital is never really spent. You just accumulate. Isn't that beautiful? So, talked a lot, writing not enough. Let's write a little bit, right? Cultural capital accumulates. Cultural capital creates haves and have-nots. It also creates, you perceive a smallness in yourself and others. Isn't that beautiful? It creates a structure of power. Good. That's all nice and well. Let's talk about the hardest of the three. Let's talk about hexis. So, ready? That's the freakiest one. And then we go about interactions and things like that. Hexis is, you can think of it of kind of like an aura, right? But not at all. The way you behave, the way you put yourself, right? The way all your non-verbal communication exteriorize something to people that they can read it, right? That creates what we call a corpus. Hexis is a very specific corpus. It's a corpus of I belong here. Now that's very beautiful. See, a non-verbal continuous cue that you belong here. What is interesting on that is that hexis is to self-confidence as temerity is to bravery. Make sense? No, it doesn't. Let's detail that, right? Hexis is to confidence like temerity is to fear. So, to bravery. So, a person is courageous, is brave, if they feel the fear and brave it, right? You have the fear in you and you go beyond it. That's bravery, right? Temerity is that you never ask yourself the question of danger. Yeah? Like a baby is temerary. That's why we need to protect it, right? A baby could just fall off a cliff. It doesn't realize there is danger. Right? Yeah?
I'm talking about the sort of the concept of having like an inherent privilege that you never need to worry about the...
Exactly. Hexis is to self-confidence as temerity is to bravery. Confidence is, you ask yourself, do I belong here? And the answer is yes. Hexis, you don't ask yourself that question. The question doesn't make sense. You don't even imagine that people are asking themselves that question. The question does not relate to your brain at all. Right? But then, when you are indoctrinated from birth at some specific class of people, I will not talk about who, when you are indoctrinated from birth to never ask yourself that question, well, you do pass by somebody that really believes in themselves a lot. Right? And it so happens that our society gatekeeps a lot on confidence. And the thing is, that's beautiful. Society gatekeeps a lot of confidence. And when we see somebody doubting themselves, we believe that that person is a little bit less competent than when we see somebody not doubting themselves. So we tend to see the person that believes in themselves as being a little bit more righter, even if they aren't, even if what they want to do is completely stupid. We see them as a little bit more right because they trust themselves. So they must have some good reasons to that. Again, yes, you are the exception. Doesn't change anything. Statistically, that works out. Yeah? And that's the thing. We see people that trust themselves as being righter, people that were from birth indoctrinated to never doubt themselves, are leaps and bounds beyond you in everything because they always go like they own the place. Right? That's why you get like, every year you get like almost in countries, in like United States, in many other countries, like people from out of nowhere that have no basis whatsoever to believe they have any vote candidating for presidency. Right? They have like zero support network, no basis at all, and they do it, and they believe in it. That's what's beautiful about it. Right? They never doubt themselves. Or very little, very rarely. Make sense? So, hexis open a lot of doors. And it's very difficult to show. So I'll just try to show an example of somebody that has hexis. That is difficult, right? Right. That is very, very, very difficult. And I mean, I don't know, right? Have you ever seen this guy? Right. And there are some people that spend an inordinate amount of time to learn to give the impression they don't have it, to be more approachable, right? Inverts the whole thing. There was a French president that did that. Maybe you have heard about him. We called him Flamby. Hexis is that. you see people with access as being more acceptable or having power. When you have access, it's become easier to get social capital, easier to get cultural capital, easier to get symbolic violence. This all intertwined in powerful ways. Those three feed on each other and creates a lot of difference between people. And those are only three. I just wanted to cover them, right? There's like infinite numbers of those. I just wanted to cover those three because I like them. Up until now, does this make sense? Let's connect to tech. Let's go for that. Okay. So, thing is, friends, raise your hand if you are in the 1% global richer people in the world. Okay. So let's. Thank you for the 4 people that raised their hand. Let me introduce you to something. The book about that is The Haves and Have-Nots, I believe. It's the name of the book. No. Yes, by Branko Milanovic, right? Branko was the only person I know. If you know another study, please tell me. But the only study I know seriously about this was by the World Bank and was done by the economist Branko Milanovic. You can find the results of the study in the World Bank documents, or you can buy this book. And Branko's conclusion, when he studied what at the time, so it's kind of oldish, right? 2010, right? It's 11 years old now, right? But at the time, it's the only serious study I know about the topic. To be in the 1% global richer in the whole world, right? You don't need any capital. It could be like on the red every month, just be a salary person, and ending paycheck to paycheck, ending your months negative, right? And still be in the 1% richer of the world, right? All you need, 1% global richer, all you need is $34,000 of brute salary. So let me ask you again, who here is the 1% richer in the world? Welcome. Welcome to the caste system. So why the caste system? So what happens here is, I want you to ask yourself one very important question now that you are in tech. Have you ever looked around you, not you, of course, but have you ever looked around you in your job, your clients maybe, somewhere around your professional life, and watch somebody that you believe has given up? They're just trying the smallest effort they can to just go with the flow and then not bother with this and just keep the paycheck. Ever seen one person like that? Right. They are in the 1% global richer, right? Right. You could, now you say, oh, Romeu, but I put a lot of effort in becoming the best I can in the current system, and everything my salary in the 1% rich is because I put a lot of effort in this, right? Maybe you're telling yourself that, right? So I want to kill that idea right now. You could become that person. You can just give up, and will still be in the 1% global richer, right? Do you agree with that? For life, basically. And there are like 7 billion people that couldn't. Do you agree on that? Welcome to the caste system. You are in a caste that will not leave, maintained in a system that gives the illusion of fairness and mobility, while maintaining itself with an hierarchy maintained by the things I just described, such as symbolic violence, hexis, cultural capital, things like that, social capital, things like that. Right? Right? Right. So you are set for life. Good for you. What I'm saying is, if you agree on that, if you can only keep one thing from this presentation, one thing only, it is, please, kill all illusions of merit. Meritocracy is our age's divine mandate of kings. Meritocracy is the lie you tell yourselves to feel good about the place you are in the caste system. Okay? The king is king because God chose the king. I am in the 1% global richer as a tech person because I rocked at this shit. Yes? Same stuff. Bullshit. Now, if we stop lying to yourselves about this, right? If you accept that you could give up and still be 1% rich, you probably lose some money, right? Probably will have some impact to your social capital, some impact to a lot of things, but you could give up and still be in the 1% richer. And there are most people could not. They could work as fuck and will never be there. If you accept that, there is no merit. You deserve nothing. Yay. Yes?
So, talking about it, do you believe that someone who is that 99% of people can jump to 1%?
Oh, yes, it can. No, that's very important. Right. Sorry. We precisely need some token level of social mobility to keep the illusion going. It is fundamental to the system that some people change castes. Otherwise, we will end up understanding that this is happening, right? So the system maintains itself. Now, when we talk about system maintains itself, there is no Illuminati here. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is an emergent behavior of the system. This is not a choice behavior of the system. You can have a behavior emerge and not be chosen by any entity of the system. That's frequent. That's what we call homeostasis. Okay? It's the point of equilibrium of a system. And that's key, yes?
So following question, how that would happen? Someone move from one to another?
It happens all the time. I mean, Barack Obama was president, right? Right. Happens all the time. It doesn't happen enough to change the configuration of the whole thing. It just happens all the time. And if you accept that, then you accept that you always have this invisible hierarchy around you. If you accept that invisible hierarchy around you, you accept that it influences everything you do with everyone you do. If you accept that, then I love the Agile Manifesto, I love agility, and yet it was created by 17 white men with high levels of cultural capital and social capital and access, right? What are the chances that it was created with everything I just told you in mind? 0. So it was created in a level playing field of equality that is just not representative of life. So, for example, a pair programming session is an awesome thing. I love pair programming. A pair programming session is a lovely thing if you are equal. A pair programming session with your boss is less fun. And maybe you're telling, Romeo, no, I pair program all the time with my boss. I see no problem with that. Yes, you don't. That's precisely my point. I also had the same issue, right? As a matter of fact, I never had bosses. I just had people that pay me, right? Yeah. I totally get what you're saying. This just means that you are very high on these all levels of things I'm talking to you about, right? So what I'm telling is, if you take symbolic violence into consideration, so if you take cultural capital violence in consideration, if you take all those violences in consideration, when you are pair programming with somebody that has a lower level of all that, you don't have a level playing field. That person is hitting themselves silently and you don't know it. I'm exaggerating things a lot. I do that. But you see what I mean? If you do a retrospective session and you have your boss in the room, it's not the same thing. But if your boss in a very invisible hierarchy, then we are condemned to think that it's now nice, it's now good, everything works. Right? Official flat organizations that ignore those dynamics of power are doubly oppressive. You still have the hierarchy, but now you're supposed to not tell people that there is an hierarchy. So what I'm trying to give you is a tool set to discuss about these things. Now, some people tell me, Romeu, we are almost in the end of the presentation, and I don't see any solution in this presentation. I get that question a lot. Spoiler alert. I'm not here to give solutions. Why? Let me explain you that, because that's important, right? Every solution I could give you to this problem would be a solution created by a guy that has a high level of access and a high level of cultural capital and a high level of social capital and a high level of symbolic power, right? What are the chances that I can create something that is actually any fair to the people oppressed by this? Right. But if I tell you, okay, so they should create. Now the people oppressed, that's very interesting, right? The people oppressed, they are condemned to be oppressed, to be the enforcers of oppression, to be invisible, to be doubted, but also to bear the whole load of finding solutions. Right. So we are fucked. And I believe, sincerely, that the only way of getting out of this is co-construction, and it's hard. But you cannot find solutions as a privileged person, and you cannot expect the unprivileged to find the solutions for you. And you are all very privileged. You are in the 1% global richer. So now it's time to start having those difficult discussions about, hey, how can we help each other progress on this? Right? And the whole point of my talk today is to give you some tools to have those discussions. Thank you very much. Any questions? I cannot hear you.
You're describing it as quite depressive, right? And in the beginning of your presentation, you said that it changes, right? Now, I'm going to say people that are overweighted are considered weak, and before they were considered strong. So
Yeah.
how do you explain these shifts in society?
We get tired of the things we value. And we seek new ones. No, it is, no living system is very static, so things just turn a little bit over time. It's life itself. Homeostasis doesn't mean that it's fixed. It means that we all reach the same equilibrium all the time. Right? For example, your body is always at 36 of temperature around Celsius, around-ish, right? And it kind of nudges around. It's never completely fixed.
Yeah, but it's never going to be 38, right?
Sorry?
But it's never going to be 38. It's always going to be 36.
I mean, I hope it's never 48. But the kind of changes, if you look over the last 10,000 years is not very big, right? It's like small things here and there. All right, another question?
I mean, do you not think that over the next 50 years, with the tilt to China and India, that maybe we will not be in the top 1%?
Totally. I mean, societies crumble. It works until you don't have a society anymore. I'm talking about the rules of this current society, but I mean, we have many times before, historically, we have had societies that have crumbled. It happens. There's always a risk of that.
Do you think, software engineering, yes, or career in software engineering, giving one of the easiest paths to move from being kind of oppressed to 1%?
I don't. I think currently in society, all paths are probably as equally hard. Software engineer is still pretty much in the same level of gatekeeping as everything else in my perception, but I may be wrong.
Because I can think about myself as an example who moved from one to another. Yes, I'm working as a software engineer for years. Yes, before that I was working in factories in less than 34,000.
Clearly, is a place where it hires a lot, and hence one of the current job where people can have some social mobility or something like that, but it doesn't mean by itself that it's more open than the others. That's what I'm saying. And I may be wrong on that.
It could be that, again, statistics say one, and I'm kind of an example.
Yeah.
It doesn't change it.
Any other final questions? Yes.
You said that no models were perfect. What are the flaws in this? You said that no models were perfect. What are the flaws in this one, and are there any models that directly contradict?
Oh yeah. There are many different models here. That question will not be quick. We can discuss outside if you want. Yeah, because this is just ringing time's up. Sorry. Thank you very much, friends. See you next time. I'll be here tomorrow and things like that. And